And then we came to Everest, and I think I was the youngest on the team, or one of the youngest on the teams. And it's quite daunting because you read all the stories of Everest and then you just kind of see it, and it's quite a big mountain. I mean, it sounds really obvious to say that, but actually when you look at it in person, you're like, oh my God, that's a serious bit of rock.
Rupert began mountaineering at the age of 22. Despite summiting Everest on the 17th of May, he was unable to complete his double ascent due to his oxygen being stolen. Less than a year later, and despite the odds, he summited the notorious Annanpurna, becoming one of only a handful of Britons to do so, and also the youngest. Rupert, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure.
I just wanted to start by asking, when did you start climbing?
I started climbing, I think it was around 2013, 2014. I originally had a background in sailing and spent my youth and early 20s sailing pretty much every weekend and all over the world. And just sort of it just came to the point where I needed a bit of a break and wanted to try something new. And it was around the time.
Mountaineering was a break though.
No, it's a slightly different sort of challenge. And I remember reading a lot of books around the 60th anniversary of the first ascent of Everest. Read several books, got really hooked, and was like, this is something, I'd like to try. And before I knew it, I was been to the Alps, been climbing Mont Blanc and then a load of other mountains in the Alps, then heading towards my first Himalayan peak. And then before I knew it, I was at the bottom of Everest thinking, oh, this has all happened quite quickly.
I wanted to ask you, start with the books. What was it about the books that appealed to you? Because, there are so many that you could have chosen. What was it about the mountains?
I think it was just, it was 1953 was obviously the first successful ascent of Everest. There had been many climbs in the 20s, which I thought were just interesting. It was really interesting seeing people, going and risking their lives for something, which, to be honest, is quite pointless in many ways. But there was a real sort of thrill to it. And, I thought it was fascinating seeing all these teams failing, succeeding in this sort of race towards the summit of these big peaks, especially Everest. And that's sort of like, I like the history, I like the stories, some good, some bad. You've obviously got the ones in the 90s, which are pretty bad, but I just wanted to go and witness it for myself, and that was a real sort of allure to it, really. And I think it kind of, that's part of it.
And tell me about your team. So then how did you start preparing for it, and how did you build a team that you trusted?
Well, there's a lot of trial and error involved. I think when I first started, saying I was interested in climbing and stuff, you get a lot of people who are interested in supporting you, a lot of people who introduce you to people. You get a lot of perspectives quite quickly, and you've just got to listen to everyone and trust everyone. I say trust everyone. You have got to trust everyone, and you've got to go and kind of see it for yourself. Some expeditions were good. There was good logistics, there was good people around. Some not so good, and actually it's quite hard to choose that. You've kind of got to just go by trial and error and try and work it out yourself. It's not easy. You just got to listen to your guts and listen to other people.
So when it comes to something like Everest, you were working with Sherpas. How do you select them? Are they people? I have no idea. So is it something that you get there and you meet people and you select, or do you select people in advance to work with?
It varies a lot. You have a lot of operators out in Nepal who are, putting expeditions together for Everest. You get the local teams out there. You've got the Western teams. And usually what happens is you'll have like a Sherpa team, and you might have a Western leader, and they will kind of liaise with the Sherpa team and liaise with the Westerners and create a team that kind of works. A lot of the time that's great. A lot of the time, or some of the time, it's not so good. And you kind of got to meet the leaders. You've got to talk to lots of leaders and try and get people who are interested in what you're going out to do and are invested in your goals and your interests and appreciate the time and effort you've put in and what it means to you. And I've had teams which have worked really perfectly, and I've had teams which, you know, that's not so good. And actually, the recent team I went with to Annapurna, I was with a guy called Nims Dai, who is quite a big deal now, and he's a really impressive guy. He's a really nice guy, and I went with the Annapurna team. I messaged him about going to K2 and spoke to him about doing K2, and he was a really large than life character. And I trusted him. I got a real, you know, a good sense from him. And in the end, he invited me to come to Annapurna with him, which is part of the beginning of his Project Possible, which is the 14 highest peaks in 7 months, which was awesome. And
but has a very low success rate. So what was it that made you want to do it? Was it the low success rate? You wanted to see if you could? To
be honest, I wasn't looking at Annapurna at this sort of state because it had a low success rate, because it had a high fatality rate. It wasn't something that was on my radar at this moment in time. I was looking at K2 after Everest, but it was Nims who kind of persuaded me to go to Annapurna, and I was like, oh no. But if there was going to be a year where it was successful, it would have been, you know, that year. And we had a small team. We had a very accomplished team, a very strong team.
If there was going to be a year, what was it about that year that was special?
Well, I think usually with Annapurna, I mean, it's incredibly dangerous, and there are a huge amount of risks. And because of the risks, people are very hesitant about taking those risks and pushing. I mean, the guy I was with, Håkon, who became the first Norwegian to summit, he was there the year before, and there were loads of avalanches, and he came away, you know, alive by the skin of his teeth. You know, Don Bowie, another, you know, incredible Canadian climber. I think he'd been there 6 times. He's probably going to be annoyed that I've said that if it's not 6 times. But, you know, and he'd come away every time without a summit. Admittedly, he was trying some really hard stuff on there. But it's not a mountain you go to for success. But Nims was like, had to get this summit to get his 14 peaks. So it was like, you know, it was going to happen. And I really trust him. I really trust his team. I had a great vibe from them. And, you know, in the future, I know exactly who I'm going with, because he'll make it happen. He's invested in the individuals he goes with. And, yeah, and you know, if anything happens, I know that he'll be there to help me out. So, not that I'd rely on him for that, but you know, he's that sort of guy.
So, I mean, so many questions. I wanted to ask how important it is to have a mentor figure like him in your life as a mountaineer. Are you lucky? Is that fortunate? Or do you think there are many people who have someone that they go to for that advice and expertise and experience?
I think it's really good to have someone like that. What's good about Nims is, like, you go to him with some mad idea. I've got a mad idea for K2, which I'm not going to kind of say at the moment until I get the funding for it, in case someone else beats me to it. But, you know, it doesn't matter how kind of ambitious or mad your project is. People are like, yeah, we'll make it happen. And actually, that's what you need. You need someone with that sort of attitude, rather than someone who's like on the fence, umming and ahhing, like, well, you know, you just need someone who's like, yeah, we'll get it done. And you need someone you can trust that will put that in place and make it happen.
So what was,
and Nims is that guy.
With the difference between Everest and Annapurna when you're with Nims, I mean, obviously with the risks are much greater with Annapurna. I was wondering what a difference it made to be with Nims. Did you feel the same hesitation before starting each climb, or did you feel somehow, despite the risks, more confident about climbing Annapurna, having already summited Everest almost twice?
I was confident that if it was going to happen with Nims, the thing is, it's the things that you don't, it's the avalanches, and the things you can't kind of guess that's going to happen. That is a scary thing. Like, you're taking that risk, doesn't matter who you're with. And I knew that when we were going, there was going to be a big risk that things, you know, could go. But you're in it together. You know, there's a guy with a good sense of humour, and a good guy to be around. So, you know, you just got to go for it.
Let's go back to Everest, because that was your first major climb after Mont Blanc, as far as I understand. How did you prepare for that?
Okay, so fine. Okay, I did quite a bit between Everest and going to between Mont Blanc and going to Everest. Mont Blanc was the first one. I did a few other things in the Alps, and then I did 2 expeditions in the Himalayas prior to going to Everest. So technically, I done enough really. Maybe there's not enough, but I've done quite a bit. I'd spent quite a lot of time at altitude in the Himalayas, so I kind of got a grasp for it. And I was doing a huge amount of kind of long distance running, cycling, etc. So physically, I was really fit. Mentally, I was prepped for it.
How do you prep mentally? That's something I'm fascinated by.
Well, I would say, everyone would probably say different things, but I would say just going out and being in uncomfortable positions, whether that going for long runs and just pushing yourself harder than you've ever been, just getting in that mindset where you're like, this is incredibly uncomfortable. I really want to stop, but actually I need to keep going. With that running or cycling, and you just build robustness after a period of time. So when it comes to actually sitting on Everest, you know what it's like to be in that uncomfortable position. You know what it's like to keep going for another few hours, and it's just miserable. You just got to suck it up. So it's just getting used to just being incredibly uncomfortable
and miserable.
Sounds miserable, great. Yeah.
So when you get to base camp, what does it feel like? Are you excited? Are you hesitant at all? How did you feel?
So the first time I went to Everest, I was really it's quite daunting, to be honest. I'd been to this was in 2015, the year of the earthquake, and prior to going to Everest, we went and did a 2-week acclimatization in the Langtang Valley, which is a beautiful area of Nepal. We climbed a 5,000 meter peak, and we trekked through this beautiful valley just to acclimatize and get used to it. And then we came to Everest, and I think I was the youngest on the team, or one of the youngest on the teams. And it's quite daunting because you read all the stories of Everest and then you just kind of see it, and it's quite a big mountain. I mean, it sounds really obvious to say that, but actually when you look at it in person, you're like, oh my God, that's a serious bit of rock. It is quite daunting. It is quite daunting, but you've just got to take it day by day, and do what you can each day. I was quite fit. I was confident with my fitness. I was confident with my training. And I was confident in myself, so I just had to get through each day as it came, do my best, eat lots, drink lots, sleep lots, which sounds really obvious, but if you don't do it, you just fall apart.
And then how far into it did the avalanche occur? How far into
well, I'm trying to think. So we did 2 weeks of acclimatizing in Langtang, and then we came to Everest, and we climbed up to the North Col, which is around 7,000 meters. And then we came back, and it was a rest day at base camp, and I was on the north side of Everest, on the Tibetan side. And it was a beautiful day. It was like clear blue skies. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. No winds, just sun. And I was lying down in my tent, and just the earth just shook. And I didn't realize quite what it was at the time. I thought someone was shaking my tent. And I was like, how bizarre. And I got out of my tent, realized it was an earthquake. And a few rocks came down, a few avalanches of rocks around us, but not near us.
Had you been in avalanche training? Did you know what to do?
It was too far away it was rockfall really, and it was too far away to affect us. But it was quite an impact, sort of like visually. And then it was absolutely still, and it was like, oh gosh, that was an earthquake, and that was kind of it. And then the notifications started coming through on the news, on your apps, and you're like, earthquake hit Nepal, and then you see the devastation of what's happened, and it was just mind-blowing. And looking back, Langtang, where we'd been acclimatizing a few weeks before, had been hit massively. I think, I was just googling the stats just before this conversation, and 300 in that valley, 310 were killed. A whole village was covered. Across Nepal, in the end, 9,000 people died, and I think 19 on Everest. And it was bizarre because we were sat there. It was a beautiful, calm day, and there was absolute devastation around us. Where we'd just been to Kathmandu, we'd been to Langtang. Both had been hit massively. On the other side of Everest, there were people, tweets going up about people, needing help and rescue, and it was a really surreal experience. a really surreal experience. And I was 23 at the time. It was a bit of an eye opener, really. I mean, in some ways, that's incredibly lucky that, well, I am incredibly lucky that, you know, I survived it. And, you know, I didn't really see devastation and death that a lot of other people did. But we tried, like, we were a small team. We wanted to try and provide some help if we could in Kathmandu. But we were stuck on the Chinese side of Everest. And we wanted to get back. All the roads had been destroyed going back to Kathmandu and back into Nepal. And we were going to fly and go to Lhasa airport and then try and fly into Kathmandu. But by that time, the airport had been destroyed. And it was just bizarre. I think we were stuck at base camp for about a week. But the whole experience was just peculiar, really. But, you know, you come back to the UK and it's just like business as usual. And you're like, what on earth is going on?
So surreal.
It's very surreal.
But then you attempted again, and you both times you were aiming for a double summit.
I was quite ambitious. You know, even looking back now, I'm like, gosh, that was quite ambitious, really, of me with my to be
Very
doing
ambitious.
something like that. It was quite ambitious,
especially considering, you know, the fact that some people have had much more experience. I think that it's admirable what you set out to do, and so nearly got there as well. But tell me about the summit. How you then obviously, how was the climb?
So I went back in 2018. The build up to getting all the funding was incredibly hard, and it would have been way easier after 2015 just to say, do you know what, I'm done. That's it. But I was determined to give it another shot. Looking back, it's pretty stubborn actually, but I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go back. And I put loads of time into raising the sponsorship, trying to make it happen. Eventually I got back. Instead of starting on the north side this time, I started on the south side, which is the Nepalese side. So it was going through the beautiful Khumbu Icefall.
But can I just stop you there and ask you how you
Yes.
choose your route? What is it about a route that appeals to you? Do you have a gut instinct, or did you want it to be slightly different to the 2015 edition?
No, the reason I did it in 2015 starts on the north side is because I didn't want to spend too much time going backwards and through the Khumbu Icefall, which you have on the south side, which is arguably probably the most dangerous part in Everest because you're going through all these crevasses and glaciers. And actually, if you know, that's the most chance, that's the dangerous part because the glacier moves, ice comes down, smashes you, you know, you fall down a crevasse, etc. So I wanted to avoid that as much as possible and go up the north side where you didn't have that, and then come and go through the south side, which would have been quicker. But logistically, it would have been easier to start the south side. So the second time I went back to the south side, went through the Khumbu Icefall, summited on, I think, the 17th of May, which was a peculiar experience because I was trying to do the double and my focus was on climbing it twice. I didn't really sit back and appreciate that I had just climbed Everest. My mindset was, right, get up, get down, get around and do it again. So I didn't really appreciate at the time what I'd done, which I kind of regret. It was sort of like a race, you know, you're halfway there, you know, don't lose focus.
Not even halfway, quarter way.
Yeah. You're right.
For most people, it's halfway.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so looking back, and then sorry, I summited, came back down, which was great, and then I jumped in a helicopter, flew to Kathmandu, then flew back into the Chinese side of Everest, and I was on track to make my second summit in the week. When I arrived in China, everyone was packing up apart from us, so everyone else was going home, and I arrived with 2 Sherpas being like, yeah, let's climb the mountain, and which was a bit irritating because logistically we didn't have the support if anything went wrong, which it eventually did. But on the positives, you know, I was on Everest with 2 other people and we had the whole mountain to ourselves, or at least the Chinese side, which was incredible, like absolutely incredible. There was no one else around. So we were on track to make, I was on track to make my second summit in a week on the north side, arrived at the North Pole where oxygen was meant to have been cached for us. Now, for some reason, it wasn't there, whether it was stolen or whether it wasn't put there in the first place, you know, I will never know. A lot of people say different things, but, you know, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And it was a really gutting experience because, you know, this is something that obviously I'd worked towards for quite a few years, and I didn't see this as being the issue. I thought the issue would be me, you know, either not being fit enough, not having the experience enough, or you know, or weather or something which would get me. But no oxygen was one that I should have foreseen, and you know, but unfortunately, it wasn't the case.
How did that affect you when you? So then, after that, obviously, you have to come back and call it quits on the double summit this time. I mean, maybe you'll get there again.
Yeah, maybe.
But how did it affect you? How does it feel to have been so close and then for there to have been no oxygen waiting for you?
It's really frustrating. Obviously, you go to these expeditions, and there are so many factors that could stop you from doing it, and most of them are out of your control. But you know, for something like that, it was quite a hard blow, really, because it's something that could have been prevented, and it was, you know, for whatever reason, whether it was stolen or whether it wasn't put there, you know, these things didn't have to have happened. And that goes back to, you know, choosing a team which is there to support you the whole way through, and having people you trust, really, and not having too many people in that dream that, you know, aren't as invested as you are. But it was, you know, it's a massive knock, and it's highly irritating. But you know, there are a lot of things. That's life, isn't it? You just got to kind of keep pushing on, and hasn't been the end of my mountaineering career.
No,
you know, and I'm still pushing on. It would, I mean, if I had succeeded, you know, I may have just called it a day and be like, yeah, done. You know, mountaineering done, easy. But actually, you know, I think I had. Yeah. You know, so but I've gone on to do other things.
You became the youngest person to climb Annanpurna. How does that affect
youngest you? Brits. To be honest, the thing which is nice about it's not so much becoming the youngest Brit. It's the history behind Annapurna, and the first summit in 1950, and then you've kind of got, you know, it's very rarely climbed. I think there are only a handful of Brits who've done it, and the Brits that have done it are pretty accomplished climbers. I mean, it was, you know, Henry Day was one of the first people to climb it in 1970. Dougal Haston, Don Williams, like they're big names in like British mountaineering, and then there's like me, which is like on the end of that list of British mountaineers, and there's like this really established, you know, climbers before me, and I feel slightly embarrassed that I'm on it. But so for me, like to be part of that, or to witness that and be one of a very few Brits to be in that's the real accomplishment. And to just, you know, try it. I wasn't going to Annapurna expecting to succeed. I wanted to go because I loved the history. I was with an awesome team, and you know, I thought it'd be an awesome experience. But to come away with a summit, and to come away the youngest Brit, which, you know, it's great. It's really just a certificate to say congratulations, you know, you've completed it. But for me, it's really about, you know, the effort and the effort really, and the risk.
And when you made the summit, did you actually take time this time round to enjoy it?
No, I should have done. The reason I wasn't, so my hands were extremely cold. So I got up there, and it was like, are we going to summit? Are we not? And then there was this race to the summit. Got up, and then my hands, I'm like, just get down. But yeah, no, it was great. It was like, it was a real relief, really, in many ways, because you put so much effort and time and emotion, and there are a lot of people backing you back home that want to see you succeed. And it was great to come away with a summit.
And obviously, these expeditions are extremely expensive to put together. Yeah. How hard is it to find sponsorship?
To be honest, it's extremely hard. I would say like 80% of the struggle is getting a sponsor. A lot of people see that success as the summit with Everest or Annapurna, and like, oh, well done, you know, that was success. But for me, actually, the success is getting to the starting point, because people don't see the effort you have to go through to get that sponsorship, especially if you're like a young climber, you know, who hasn't done a huge amount, and people take a huge risk supporting you financially. and it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle. So you just got to, accept that, most people aren't interested in supporting you. Why would we support you to climb climb a mountain and, essentially go on holiday, which which essentially is what people think. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them for thinking that. But, that's the bottom line. And you've just got to be really persistent. You've got to accept that, a lot of people aren't interested. And then there are a lot of people that are interested that, can't support in that way. You just got to keep going and just, be positive, really. It's tough. It's really tough, but you just got to keep going.
So when you're climbing, is there much pressure to be on social media whilst you're doing it from sponsors? And does that detract from the experience?
It does a bit. I mean, in 2018, I was meant to be Stravering Everest, and I thought that'd be awesome. And Strava were behind it, and it was great. And I was really keen to do it. But the reality was, and I did do it, to be fair, I did try and Strava once. It didn't help that the GPS didn't really work too well in the mountains. It gave these mad readings. But it's really hard because you're focused on what you should be focused on, what you're doing, and also enjoying it. But you've also got to kind of tell the story, and although the sponsors are like, there's no pressure from them to get content. They would, obviously they would like it, and they'd like to be able to tell the story as it's going. And it does put pressure on you, and it does take it away a bit. But they're making this happen, so you've got to suck it up and just enjoy it.
What is the best piece of advice you've been given when it comes to mountaineering?
Oh, I wasn't expecting this one. I would say the best piece of advice. Actually, do you know what? When the 2015 earthquake happened, I got a message. He obviously won't remember he's done it, but from Bear Grylls through someone else, and it was just when I decided that enough was enough, and actually we shouldn't carry on even if we wanted to, because it's not really the right thing to do. And it was like the mountain will always be there, etc., etc. As you can imagine, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but the mountain will always be there. Just do the right thing. Yeah, I think that's the thing. You just got to do what you can in that situation, and accept that things aren't always going to go your way. And as soon as you accept that, the better, the more you can enjoy it.
So K2 is next. How are you preparing for it?
Obviously, first of all, I need to get the funding together and get sponsors on board, which is great. I've got some great people on board so far, which is great. And then I've just got to get really fit. Lots of cycling, lots of running, lots of time in the hills. I'd love to go off to Chamonix this summer and go climbing there. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. K2 would be in summer next year, but we'll see what the situation is. I think see how coronavirus plays out. I think a lot of it's just going to be running around, on the south coast, which is where I'm from, and just trying to get as fit as I can, and then just hoping for the best when it comes.
Well, we look forward to hearing all about it. Thank you so much, Rupert.
That's all right. Thank you.